Westernspring Television. Ours it is.
Bola Tinubu sworn in as Nigeria's 16th president says petrol subsidy regime is over. 28 state governors inaugurated across Nigeria's 6 geopolitical zones. Dar Communication founder and PDP chieftain Raymond Dokwesi dies at 71. On the foreign scene, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan celebrates election victory, extending his rule into third decade. Good evening. This is News at 7 on Westernspring Television. My name is Tunde Idowu. Bola Tinubu and Kashim Shettima have been sworn in as the President and Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. They were sworn in today at the Eagle Square in the Federal Capital Territory. His inaugural speech, President Tinubu says the petrol subsidy regime is over, adding that his political coloration has faded away and he now sees everyone as Nigerians.
A new sheriff is in town, and his name is Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Bola Ahmed Tinubu bears true allegiance to the Federal Republic of Nigeria, that as President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria,
President Tinubu will be serving Nigerians alongside his vice, Kashim Shettima.
As Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, I will discharge my duties and perform my functions honestly, to the best of my ability, and faithfully in accordance with the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the law.
These two men today took their oath as leaders of Nigeria for the next 4 years in the presence of national and international dignitaries at the Eagle Square, Abuja. Despite the inclement weather, the inauguration of Nigeria's 16th president went on as planned with the arrival of former President Muhammadu Buhari, who was chairman of the day. That and the arrival of the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Oluwakayode Ariwola, who administered the oath, signals the end of an era and the beginning of another one. Flags folding and handing over, military parades and other colorful activities defined the day after the light showers ceased. It's time for speeches, and the president takes the podium. He pays homage to his predecessor, the Armed Forces, Chief Justice of Nigeria, and other dignitaries present. His first few sentences address the lingering issue of fuel subsidy.
Subsidy. Unfortunate. The budget that I've glimpsed before I assumed office, and what I've heard is that no provision is there for fuel subsidy. The fuel subsidy is gone.
President Tinubu goes on to assure Nigerians that their lives and property will be safe under his watch.
Security shall be top priority of our administration, because neither prosperity nor justice can prevail amid insecurity and violence. To effectively tackle this, we shall reform both our security doctrine and its architecture.
Inheriting a deeply fragmented nation with citizens divided along ethnic and religious lines, the 71-year-old Tinubu calls for fairness and equality.
Our mission is to improve our ways of life in a manner that nurtures our humanity and encourages compassion towards one another and duly reward our collective effort to social ill that seek to divide us.
President Tinubu goes further to say all hands must be on deck so as not to undo the work of heroes past.
We must never allow the labor of those who came before us to wither in vain, but to blossom and bring forth a better reality.
The president's speech comes to an end, but not without the statutory gun salute and hearty cheers.
President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Federal Republic of Nigeria. Hep, hep,
Earlier, he had taken a short trip around the Eagle Square in his motorcade. After his inauguration, attention has now turned to the former Lagos governor, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, as he seeks to chart a new path for Nigeria in the next 4 years. Mr. Muhammadu Buhari, on the other hand, has now exited the scene alongside Professor Yemi Osinbajo. Both men now return to their normal lives as private citizens. Emmanuel Ujadugele, Westernspring Television News.
Former President Muhammadu Buhari has returned to Daura, his hometown, Katsina State, a few moments after he handed over the mantle of Nigeria's leadership to President Bola Tinubu. The white-collared presidential plane touched down at the Umaru Musa Yar'Adua International Airport, carrying the former president, his wife Aisha Buhari, and their entourage at about 1:10 p.m. On arrival at the airport, Mr. Buhari was received by the newly sworn-in governor of Katsina State, Diko Rada, his deputy Farouk Jobe, alongside outgoing Attorney General and Minister of Justice Abubakar Malami, amongst other important personalities. Meanwhile, as Nigeria got a new president today, 28 state governors were also sworn in across the country's 6 geopolitical zones. Daniel Odeyemi completes the story.
As Bola Tinubu got sworn in today as the 16th president of Nigeria since the return of democracy in 1999, 28 state governors were sworn in across the country's 6 geopolitical zones, including 10 old governors who were re-elected for second terms. It will be recalled 8 states have off-cycle elections in the country. The new governors are Nasir Idris, Kebbi State, Kefas Agbo, Taraba, Basi Otu, Cross River, Peter Mba Enugu, Muhammad Bago, Niger State, Ubasani Kaduna, Ahmed Aliyu of Sokoto State, and Umar Namadi of Jigawa State. Others include Diko Rada Katsina, Umo Eno Akwa Ibom, Aisent Alia Benue, Francis Wufero Ebonyi, Siminalayi Fubara River State, Alex Oti Abia, Caleb Mutfwang Plateau, Abokabio Kano, Sharif Oborivori Delta, and Dauda Lawa of Zamfara State. 10 governors who are returning for a second term are Seyi Makinde of Oyo State, Dapo Abiodun Ogun State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu Lagos, Amadu Fintiri Adamawa, Noah Yahaya Gombe, Bala Muhammad Bauchi, Mai Malabuni Yobe, Babagana Zulum Borno, Abdullahi Sule Nasarawa, and Abdurrahman Abdurazak of Kwara State. The inauguration across Southwest was inundated by slight showers of rainfall, seen as a symbol of God's blessings by some Nigerians. In Oyo State, Seyi Makinde and his deputy Barrister Adebayo Olawa's second-term inauguration ceremony took place at the Obafemi Awolowo Stadium, Ibadan. The inauguration ceremony of Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu's second term in office and his deputy Obafemi Hamzat held at the Tafawa Balewa Stadium in Lagos State. In Ogun State, the inauguration of Dapo Abiodun into second term in office held at the MKO Abiola Stadium, Abeokuta. Meanwhile, the Kano State Governor-elect, Abba Kabir, was greeted by a massive crowd at his inauguration at the Sani Abacha Stadium in Kano. The stadium was painted red as many wore red caps, a symbol of the Kwankwasiya movement. The handover is quite important in Kano as power switches from the APC to the NNPP, with Senator Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso being a causa factor. APC's Ganduje had initially planned to hand over to the new governor on Sunday instead of Monday, the official handover date, so that he can attend the inauguration of President Bola Tinubu in Abuja. However, NNPC Abba Kabir did not attend the event on Sunday. The governor-elect's transition committee insisted that the event be held today. Mr. Ganduje thus delegated the secretary to the state government, Usman Alaji, to hand over to the new governor today. Another state with a carnival-like ceremony was Abia State. Everybody was in a celebratory mood for Labour Party's Alex Oti's inauguration. Of the 28 governors sworn in across the country today, 16 governors were elected on the platform of the All Progressive Congress. The People's Democratic Party has 10 governors, while Labour Party has one in Abia State, and the New Nigeria People's Party has one in Kano State. Daniel Odeyemi, Westernspring Television.
A top-ranking member of the ruling All Progressive Congress APC, Rotimi Amici, was conspicuously absent at the inauguration of former Lagos State Governor Bola Tinubu as Nigeria's 16th president today at the Eagle Square in Abuja. However, Mr. Amici, a former Minister of Transportation and ex-Governor of Rivers, was spotted at the inauguration of Labour Party's Alex Oti as the Governor of Abia State at the Umuahia Township Stadium. While President Tinubu was inaugurated in Abuja, 28 governors spread across 4 different political parties were sworn in simultaneously in their respective state. President Tinubu's inauguration was well attended by African leaders, including South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa, Prime Minister of Gabon Billy B. Inze, President of the Republic of Cote d'Ivoire Alassane Ouattara, Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo, Rwandan President Paul Kagame, amongst others. His predecessor, like Muhammadu Buhari and Goodluck Jonathan, witnessed the historic occasion in person. Back in June 2022, President Tinubu defeated power brokers in the APC like Mr. Amici, former Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, and Senate President Ahmad Lawan to clinch the party's ticket. There was mild drama in Kano today when the roof of the podium collapsed during the swearing-in of Abba Yusuf as governor of the state. Governor Yusuf was said to be on the podium alongside his deputy Aminu Gwazo and the acting chief judge of the state, DJ Aboki, when the roof caved in. It is understood that none of them was injured. The immediate cause of the incident could not be ascertained yet. In a now viral video, some individuals were seen attempting to rescue the situation. In Oyo State, Governor Seyi Makinde has reappointed his Chief of Staff Segun Ogunwuyi and replaced his Chief Press Secretary Taiwo Adisa with Sulaiman Olanrewaju. Until his appointment, Mr. Olanrewaju was the group business editor, Nigerian Tribune. Governor Makinde made the first 2 appointments at the presentation of the transition report held at the governor's office at Agodi, Ibadan. Separately, the governor has ordered the immediate dissolution of the disciplinary committee of park management system under the leadership of Mukaila Lamidi, popularly called Auxiliary. You're watching News at 7 on Westernspring Television. Still to come. Dar Communications founder and PDP chieftain Raymond Dokpase dies at 71. We'll bring you more on this when we return.
Born 16th September 1923, named Harry Lee Kuan and known as Lee Kuan Yew, he was often addressed by his initials of LKY. Lee Kuan Yew was a barrister and the first Prime Minister of Singapore between 1959 and 1990. Educated at Raffles Institution from 1936 to 1940 and the Fitzwilliam House between 1947 and 1949, Lee Kuan Yew established a highly effective and anti-corrupt governance system that midwives the transformation of Singapore into a high net worth income economy within a generation. He never hid his exception to Western mode democratic ideal, which he believed had not assisted developing nations to attain good government. Before his death on 23rd March 2015, the People's Action Party, which he founded, had used its political influence to establish the United World College of Southeast Asia to expand his economic ideas among countries that constitute the Asian Tiger. Westernspring Television identifies Lee Kuan Yew as a major character in history. The history of guns is traced to China. The Chinese had developed a technology civilization that produced devices identified as guns at about 1000 AD. By the end of the 13th century, the devices had become true guns and described as metal barrel firearms that fired single projectiles which occluded the barrel. When did gun become an instrument of war? The first battles to be decided by firearms were between French and Spanish soldiers. The early 16th century warfare included Magnano in 1515, Bicocca in 1522, and Pavia in 1525. The wars were fought in Italy. The gun is a weapon of destruction and death, but humanity sees it as a potent instrument of family destruction. People with guns feel safer even if they don't display it. Westernspring Television identifies history of guns as a watershed event in history. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was an anti-apartheid activist who gave his all for the elimination of what has been described as the world's most vicious rule of the unjust and man's inhumanity against man. He was born July 18, 1918 in Mvezo, South Africa. Educated and trained as a successful legal practitioner, he took up the gauntlet of a human activist against segregation by the minority white suprematists in South Africa. At the climax of his trial for treason, orchestrated by the minority South African government, the great crusader for democratic equality was prepared to pay the supreme sacrifice to establish majority rule in his native land. He told white jurists that if achieving freedom for his people was worth his life, he was prepared to die. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in Robben Island, described as the most notorious prison in the world. It was from this same prison that he came out as a free man to assume office as South Africa's first black president in 1994. Westernspring Television identifies Nelson Mandela as a watershed character in history.
Welcome back. This is still news at 7 on Westernspring Television. A reminder of our headlines. Bola Tinubu sworn in as Nigeria's 16th president, says petrol subsidy regime is over. 28 state governors inaugurated across Nigeria's 6 geopolitical zones. Dark Communications founder and PDP chieftain Raymond Dokwase dies at 71. And on the foreign scene, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan celebrates election victory, extending his rule into third decade. For a party that just lost the gubernatorial election in Osun State after holding the fourth for 12 years, The inauguration of Bola Tinubu as president came as a relief and validation of the relevance of the All Progressive Congress APC in Nigeria's political space. In this report, Olayinka Ali takes a look at the reaction of APC members across Osun State today.
This is the mood in town for the All Progressive Congress APC members in Oshogbo and Iragbiji areas of Osun State in celebrating the inauguration of President Bola Tinubu, who was sworn in as the 16th President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria today.
That as President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, I will discharge my duties and perform my functions honestly, to the best of my ability, and faithfully, in accordance with the Constitution.
Amidst a cheerful and light-hearted mood at the All Progressive Congress APC Party Secretariat at Ogoluwa here in Oshogbo, party faithful wined and dined as they were seen dancing also. Same was the tradition at Iragbiji town, the hometown of the immediate past governor Adegboyega Oyetola. Former Special Advisor to Adegboyega Oyetola on Youth and Sport, Lateef Adelabu, stated that Tinubu being the first progressive president is something worth celebrating, and he expressed his confidence in Tinubu's administration.
We are ready, as well as ready, to use the wealth of this nation to develop our nation. And I can give you the assurance that in the next 2 or 3 years, the Nigerian story in the Committee of Nations will be very different.
APC chairman in Olorunda North local government, Aminu Bolarewa, attended Tinubu's inauguration as a significant milestone in the history of Nigeria. He thereafter appealed to Nigerians to cooperate with the new president because he is versed in the administration of the country.
I want to appeal to all of us to be rest assured that through federalism, which we have been craving for, is born today in Nigeria. All the ethnic minorities in Nigeria that are apprehensive that they are being cheated in the scheme of things should be rest assured that their own destiny also will be catered for.
Alao Waid from the Directorate of Research, Publicity and Strategy, Osun APC, stated that people of Osun APC are celebrating good governance, insisting that the country under the new president will experience a tremendous change.
You know, this tells that Nigeria is in safe hand. Nigerian government is in safe hand, and as a matter of fact, people of Nigeria and Nigeria should be expecting the term legal dynamism. What do I mean? Welfareism, egalitarianism, and dynamism.
Chairman APC Burikpe Local Government, Osun State, Omogboye Mufutau, amidst the celebration at the APC Secretariat in Iragbiji, assured Nigerians that the Tinubu's administration will perform beyond imaginations.
We are celebrating the new president of Nigeria, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, new elected president. He's our leader before, and now he's a president. And we know that he will do better for all Nigerians.
The celebration continued in different parts of Oshogbo, where people were seen marrying, dancing, and hoping that the new administration would deliver its promises. Olayinka Ali, Westernspring Television News.
Former Dar Communications and chieftain of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, Raymond Dokpesi, is dead. Dokpesi died at the age of 71 in Abuja. His son, Raymond Dokpesi Jr., announced the passing of his father in a statement today. He added that more details on the funeral arrangements will be released in due course. It was gathered that Dokpesi died in an Abuja hospital after he suffered a stroke. A Catholic priest, Reverend Father Matthias Okpara, who was kidnapped by gunmen last Friday in Imo State, has regained freedom. It was gathered that Reverend Father Okpara was released by his abductors late yesterday. He was kidnapped along Ejemekuru Ogbaku Road between Oguta and Mbiatoli local government areas of Imo while returning to Owerri. He was said to have participated in the funeral ceremony of a colleague's father at Zombi community in Oguta local government area and was heading to Owerri when he was abducted. Confirming Reverend Father Okpara's release by his abductors, The police command spokesperson, ASP Henry Okoye, said the command will not rest until it ensures that the culprits were brought to justice. On the foreign scene, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his supporters today reveled in an election victory, lightening his rule into a third decade, while rival Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu said it was the most unfair election in years. He did not dispute the outcome of the polls. This report examines what lies ahead of the incumbent as he enters his third decade in office, with Ankara struggling with high cost of living and recent earthquakes in its southern province.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has won re-election according to the country's Supreme Election Council and unofficial data from the state-run Anadolu agency, in a tense runoff after he failed to secure more than 50% of votes required for an outright victory in the first round on May 14. Official results showed Kılıçdaroğlu won 47.9% of the votes to Erdogan's 52.1%, pointing to a deeply divided nation. His challenger Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu called it the most unfair election in years, but did not dispute the outcome. Complaining of the unfair elections, Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu said the president's political party had mobilized all the means of the state against him. The election has been seen as one of the most consequential yet for Turkey, with the opposition believing it had a strong chance of unseating Erdogan and reversing his policies after his popularity was hit by a cost of living crisis. Instead, victory reinforced his image of invincibility after he had already withdrawn domestic, economic, security, and foreign policy in the NATO member country of 85 million people. The prospect of 5 more years of his rule was a major blow to opponents who accused him of undermining democracy as he amassed more power, a charge he denies. Given a victory speech in Ankara, Erdogan pledged to leave all disputes behind and unite behind national values and dreams, but then switched gears, lashing out at the opposition and accusing Kılıçdaroğlu of siding with terrorists without providing evidence.
Biz öyle bir kazanacağız ki kimse kaybetmeyecek demiştik. Öyleyse bugün kazanan sadece Türkiye'dir.
It said releasing former pro-Kurdish party leader Selahattin Demirtas, whom he branded a terrorist, would not be possible under his governance. Temitakpe Ajijalaluola, Westernspring Television News.
Elsewhere in Europe, Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has called an early general election for July 23rd after his party suffered a significant setback in local and regional polls. In a televised address to the nation, Mr. Sanchez said he had informed King Felipe VI of his decision to dissolve parliament. It came a day after his Spanish Socialist Workers' Party and its junior ally Podemos lost ground during the polls, while rival Conservative People's Party and far-right party Vox outperformed. He said, although yesterday's elections had a local and regional scope, the meaning of the vote conveys a message that goes beyond that. In the United Kingdom, the Metropolitan Police plan to stop attending emergency mental health incidents has sparked criticism, with critics saying the move was potentially dangerous. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, in a letter to the Health and Social Care Services in London, said from September, officers will only attend mental health 999 calls where there is an immediate threat to life. The Met argues the move will free up officers after a significant rise in the number of mental health incidents being dealt with by the force in the past 5 years, but the Royal College of Psychiatrists president called the move unhelpful. The chair of the Norfolk and Suffolk NHS Mental Health Trust, Zoe Bellingham, also said the proposals will create a vacuum. She noted that there was no other agency to call other than the police for people in crisis, adding that there is no other agency to step in and fill the vacuum.
and limb threat the police aren't going to deploy to people in mental health crisis. But the trouble, Kimberly, is that until police officers get there and assess the situation, they're actually not really going to know precisely what the situation is with someone in mental health crisis. You know, you're going to have relatives that are extremely worried and concerned. And for 40 years, it has absolutely been the role of the police to attend in these extreme emergencies. So I have every sympathy with police officers who then find themselves spending, 10 and even longer hours with that particular individual, perhaps waiting in a hospital accident and emergency. And I think that there's much more that can be done to ensure that when a person is found by the police to be in crisis and needs to go to somewhere safe, that handover can happen much more rapidly. But for the police to withdraw as quickly as...
To the Russia-Ukraine war, explosions rang out across Kiev today as Russia launched its 16th air attack on the Ukrainian capital this month, as after unleashing dozens of missiles and drones overnight. Panicked residents, some of whom initially ignored the air raid siren, rushed for cover when the sky filled with smoke trails and blast clouds. Authorities said all the Russian missiles were shot down, but one person in the central Podil district was taken to hospital with no major damage reported. Ukraine's commander-in-chief of the armed forces, Valery Zaluzhy, said air defense shot down 11 cruise and ballistic missiles fired in the second of attacks on Kiev. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry has confirmed its forces hit Ukrainian air bases in its overnight attack. Heavy and sustained clashes could be heard in parts of Sudan's capital hours before the expiry of a shaky ceasefire deal that had brought some respite from the 6-week-old conflict. According to residents, fighting continued from yesterday into this morning in the south and west of Omdurman, one of 3 adjoining cities that make up Sudan's greater capital. Both sides have said they are considering extending the deal for a week-long ceasefire brokered by Saudi Arabia and the United States that was designed to allow for the distribution of aid and is due to expire at 9:45 p.m. local time today. Sudan's army and the paramilitary rapid support forces have been locked in a power struggle that erupted into conflict on April 15th, killing hundreds and driving nearly 1.4 million people from their homes. Still ahead, President Bola Tinubu says 18.5% interest rate of the Central Bank of Nigeria is too high. We have more on this and other business stories after this break. Please stay with us.
Mao Zedong at birth, but globally known as Mao Zedong, he was a Chinese revolutionary and founder, People's Republic of China, which he led as chairman of the Chinese Communist Party from 1949 until his death in 1976. He was a communist who believed in the attainment of power by the instrumentality of gun. His wise saying, "Political power grows out of the barrel of gun," formed the major plank of his revolutionary struggle for the control of China. In the long span of his leadership and political power, Mao Zedong relentlessly entrenched the communist philosophy in China, which emphasized the revolutionary struggle of the vast majority of people against the exploiting class and their state structures. The communist leaders defined the class struggle as people's war. Mao Zedong was a story of grass to grace, having risen from peasantry to preeminent status as China's most respected leader. Westernspring Television identifies Mao Zedong as a major character in history. The British Empire was the largest and the most powerful in the world. At its zenith, the empire embraced a quarter of the Earth's land surface and imposed her imperial majesty's rule on more than 458 million peoples across nations and continents. The empire took off with overseas possessions and trading posts established by England, spread over 3 million kilometers between 16th and early 18th century. Like previous empires, the British Empire began to crumble on its weight of overstretched territories and growing unrest in our various colonies. Today, the British Empire no longer exists. What is in place is the Commonwealth of Nations, a loose association of sovereign states which recognize the King of England as the titular head. Westernspring Television identifies the British Empire as a watershed empire in history. Born Jeremiah Oyeni Obafemi on March 6, 1905, Obafemi Awolowo was a prime architect of Nigeria's independence and most consummate advocate of free education and social welfare in Africa's most populous nation. Erudite politician, thinker, and philosopher, Awo was fondly addressed by associates and political colleagues, brought his unique attributes to bear on governance in the defunct Western region. He administered as leader of government business and the premier between 1955 and 1958. Obafemi Awolowo's premiership witnessed pioneering in multi-sectoral policy initiatives and execution. The Western region under his administration paraded several enviable records. First television station in Africa, first real estate in Nigeria, first high-rise building in Nigeria, first modern sports stadium in Nigeria, first agricultural settlement in Nigeria, first modern civil service secretariat in Nigeria, and first industrial estate in Nigeria. His face is on 100 naira denomination as a mark of honor for his distinguished services to his country. Westernspring Television identifies Obafemi Awolowo as a major character in history.
You're welcome back. Now to some business stories. President Bola Tinubu says the current 18.5% interest rate of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, is too high. Last week, the Apex Bank raised the monetary policy rate from 18% to 18.5% in an effort to tame rising inflation. Addressing Nigerians during his inaugural speech, President Tinubu said the interest rate needs to be adjusted downwards to encourage investment. He further described the interest rate as anti-people and anti-business. The president also said his administration will review the Naira redesign policy, but noted that in the meantime, his administration will treat both currencies as legal tender. President Tinubu said his administration will target a higher gross domestic product growth as well as a significant reduction in unemployment. He said his administration will create meaningful opportunities for young people, including creating 1 million new jobs in the digital economy. On agriculture, President Tinubu said rural incomes will be secured by commodity exchange boards, guaranteeing minimal prices for certain crops and animal products.
Of the rule of law. Over decades ago, our founding fathers bravely gave us this country to place Nigeria on the map of an independent nation. We must never allow the labor of those who came before us to wither in vain, but to blossom and bring forth a better reality. Let us take the next great step. The journey they began and believed in. Today, let us commit our steps to placing Nigeria in our hearts as the indispensable home for each and every one of all, regardless of creed.
Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo has said the $3 billion bailout from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, will not immediately address the country's economic challenges. In a televised address to the nation, the Ghanaian president said the IMF bailout will restore confidence and put the country's economy back on a sounding footing. He noted that the loan should also lead to the resumption of many of the infrastructural projects that have stalled. He acknowledged that seeking help from the IMF was a painful but necessary decision to help the economy recover from the impact of the global pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Ghana is facing one of its worst crises in a generation with high public debt and inflation, with critics blaming the country's economic problem down on gross mismanagement.
Support of the Ghanaian people to concentrate on protecting lives at any cost. But I do not think anyone, anywhere, imagined the effect would be so widespread, so destructive, and so deep. I owe it to you, my compatriots, and to myself, to go to any length to bring the economy to the rude health it was in before the onset of the pandemic. When things came to the state, where I concluded we had to go to the International Monetary Fund to access a facility for budgetary support, I gave a directive to the Minister of Finance to start the process. It was a painful decision for me to take, because going to the IMF was not part of the economic transformation agenda I'd been pursuing, especially as my government had gone the extra mile to bring to a successful end the IMF program we inherited from the previous government. But who would have imagined that President Akufo-Addo would order the closure of airports, offices, factories, or schools? We were in extraordinary times, and we took extraordinary measures. And when faced with the realities of the economic crisis last year, I accepted the challenge that the economy required a similar attitude, including the sacrifices many of us have made in recent times. Luckily, the International Monetary Fund has been most supportive, and we have ended up with having our program approved in record time, culminating in the formal approval by the IMF board on 17th May.
In the United States, President Joe Biden has finalized an agreement with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy to raise the debt ceiling over 2 years until January 4th, 2025, saying the deal is ready to move to Congress for a vote. The Democratic president and Republican speaker spoke as negotiators rushed to draft and post the bill's text to enable lawmakers to review compromises that are unlikely to be popular with progressive Democrats or hard right Republicans. The two men hope they can secure sufficient votes before the June 5 deadline to avert a first-ever default by the federal government. A vote in the House is expected on Wednesday. The deal follows weeks of heated negotiations between Mr. Biden and Republicans to avoid a default that could cause financial market to freeze up.
Just spoke with Speaker McCarthy, and we've reached a bipartisan budget agreement that we're ready to move to the full Congress. And I think it's a really important step forward, And it takes the threat of catastrophic default off the table, protects our hard-earned and historic economic recovery. And the agreement also represents a compromise, which means no one got everything they want. But that's the responsibility of governing. And this is a deal that's good news, I believe you'll see, for the American people. The agreement prevents the worst possible crisis, a default for the first time in our nation's history. An economic recession, retirement accounts devastated, millions of jobs lost. It also protects key priorities and accomplishments and values that congressional Democrats and I have fought long and hard for. Investing in America's agenda that's creating good jobs in communities throughout the country. It protects Social Security, Medicare, and veterans, and so much more.
And talking sports, Nigeria will face rivals Argentina in the round of 16 of the 2023 Under-20 World Cup. The Flying Eagles will take on the host in an encounter on Wednesday, May 31st, 2023. Ladan Bozo's team finished as one of the third best placed teams after earning 6 points from 3 Group D games. Argentina, on the other hand, won all 3 games in front of an enthusiastic home crowd. Argentina are tournament favorites and the most successful team in the competition, having clinched 6 titles. And in England, Chelsea have hired Mauricio Pochettino as their new manager as the Argentine accepted the daunting task of reviving the troubled Premier League club. Pochettino agreed a 2-year contract with an option for an additional year and will return to the Premier League 4 years after being sacked by Chelsea's rivals, Tottenham. The 51-year-old had been out of work since being dismissed by Paris Saint-Germain in July 2022. Pochettino, who will begin his new role on July the 1st, replaces Frank Lampard after the former England midfielder returned to Chelsea as the club's 4th manager of a dismal campaign. After guiding Napoli to a first Serie A title in 33 years, Mauricio Luciano Spalletti is taking a year-long sabbatical. 64-year-old Spalletti, who took over in July 2021 and secured 3rd in his first season, has a year left on his deal. Napoli president Aurelio De Laurentiis said he will respect the decision. The club won their first Italian top-flight title since 1990 on the 4th of May with 5 games to spare and reached the Champions League quarter-finals. Recording victories over Liverpool, Ajax and Rangers during the group stage, Napoli, who drew 2-2 at Bologna yesterday, play their final match of the season at home to Sampdoria next Sunday. Borussia Dortmund's England midfielder Jude Bellingham has been named the Bundesliga Player of the Season. The 19-year-old was key in his side's title challenge, but a 2-2 draw with Mainz on the final day of the season saw them lose out to Bayern Munich. He scored 8 goals and provided 5 assists in 31 league appearances this season as Dortmund finished runner-up. Bellingham is being tipped to join Real Madrid this summer in a deal worth more than 100 million euros. And to tennis, Cameron Norrie maintained British interest in the French Open singles after holding off France Benoît Paire in an entertaining first-round contest. Norrie, succeeded 14th, is the only Briton through to the second round after a 7-5, 4-6, 3-6, 6-1, 6-4 win at Roland Garros. Jack Draper's injury problems continued as he retired from his first-round match with a shoulder issue. Dan Evans lost his opening match yesterday, and there are no British women in the main draw. In the meantime, former U.S. Open champion Sloane Stephens showed why she is one of the French Open most dangerous unseeded players by knocking out Carolina Pliskova. American Stephens won 6-0, 6-4 against the Czech 16th seed and 2-time Grand Slam finalist. Stephens, runner-up in Paris in 2018, was not ranked high enough to be seeded when the draw was made last week, but is now 30th, which would have been enough. Compatriot Madison Keys also advanced after winning 6-1, 3-6, 6-1 against Estonia's Kia Kanepi. 2021 runner-up Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova of Russia beat Czech teenager Linda Fruvirotova 6-2, 6-2.
Hi Sloane, congratulations. You've enjoyed lots of success throughout your career, but you've also got interests outside tennis as well. Do you think it's possible to have a happy work-life balance and do lots of things? Or do you think in terms of having to achieve a certain level of success that you have to sacrifice other aspects of your life?
Yeah, I mean, obviously my tennis career has been amazing. My professional career outside of tennis has been amazing. I've been able to do incredible things, and a lot of the work and things behind the scenes I've been very proud of. I think that obviously with tennis being an 11-month sport, it does limit you in the things that you're passionate about outside of tennis. There's definitely some conflicting times, and I think you do have to make a lot of sacrifices in terms of whether it's going to be tennis or whether it's going to be your other passions and things that you want want to do. So that's obviously tough. But I think in my tennis career, I've been able to do all of the things that I've wanted to do. I graduated college, I got my degree, I got my master's degree. I've done everything that I've wanted to do, which has been really nice. And yes, some people may say that I, didn't do everything I should have done in tennis, but I think in life, when you can be proud of the things that you've done and the choices and decisions that you make for yourself, at the end of the day, that's all that really matters.
Just following up on what you've just told us about balancing your personal interests and your sporting.
And that's all of this are, but before we go, here is a recap of our major stories. Bola Tinubu and Kashim Shettima have been sworn in as President and Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. As Nigeria got a new president today, 28 state governors were sworn in across the country's 6 geopolitical zones. Founder of Dar Communications and the chieftain of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, Raymond Dokpesi, is dead. On the foreign scene, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his supporters today reveled in an election victory, lightening his rule into a third decade. Please do follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Westernspring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Westernspring Television. I am Tunde Udo. Good evening.